the Rock Fight, where we speak our truth, slay sacred cows, and sometimes agree to disagree. This is an outdoor podcast that aims for the head. I'm Colin True, and today, as you no doubt could tell by the title of this episode, we are back with another outdoor movie review. And what makes an outdoor movie review different from any other movie review, you may ask? Well, I'll tell you, my guest and I are not only top of the pyramid outdoor enthusiasts, she more than I might say, but we also have real lives, and some would say that we are cinephiles. And today, we're going to Voltron together those two skill sets, watch a movie known for its outdoor elements, and determine if that movie wants to make us go outside, the highest acclaim an outdoor themed movie can achieve. So who is my guest? Well, surprise, surprise, Rock Fighters. It's not Justin Hausman today, but on the red carpet instead, it's the one, the only Shawnté Salabert. She's back.
All right. Thanks so much for having me, Colin. I am thrilled to be talking with you today about
what movie, Shawnté? What movie are we talking about?
We're going to talk about Vertical Limit.
Do you remember the first time you saw Vertical Limit? I honestly, it's been a long time.
Oh, same for me. I had to think, when I rewatched it this week, I realized that I hadn't seen it in a really long time. Let's say, I don't know, sometime in the last 10 years for sure was probably the last time I saw it, or the first time I saw it. And I think it was... I guarantee you it was when I went through a whole phase where I was looking to see any vaguely mountain-related movie I could find on Netflix. And this was on Netflix at the time. And I was like, well, this looks great. I can't wait.
We were trying to find a way to get you back on the show, and you've been incredibly busy. You have so much going on. I'm like, let's do a movie review. What do you want to do? And you did not hesitate. You're like, we're doing Vertical Limit. Like, it was just like, boom, right there. Why did you want to talk about this?
I mean, listen, in my opinion, Vertical Limit is sort of like the showgirls of mountain movies. Like,
is that an insult or a compliment?
It's both. It's both. It's really a compliment because, listen, Showgirls, okay? You've seen Showgirls, yes?
I have.
Naomi, bless her. Showgirls is a cinematic legend. It's iconic for multiple reasons. And we could look at Vertical Limit and say the same thing. You know,
it's true.
Everybody has their own experience when they watch these movies. And maybe they're not exactly Oscar nominated, but they absolutely live on in the zeitgeist. So that is, for me, Vertical Limit is like more than 127 hours or Wild or anything like that. It's like one of those outdoor movies that it wants to be so much.
Well, let's dig into it. I'll start with the synopsis. This is just the Googled synopsis, which I think I already have issues with it, even in the synopsis. So the synopsis is, feeling responsible for his father's death, which occurred on a climbing expedition. All right, number one right there. Not a climbing expedition. They were just rock climbing. But okay, let's not slow things down. Peter Garrett, Chris O'Donnell's character, has quit the pursuit in favor of photography, while his sister Annie, Robin Tunney, has become a top climber after Annie is hired by the wealthy businessman Elliot Vaughn, played by the incomparable Bill Paxton, to lead a trek. Inclement weather causes the crew to be trapped. Facing his fears, Peter assembles a rescue team, including experienced climber Montgomery Wick, who's Scott Glenn, to save them.
Inclement.
Definitely glossed over a few things in that synopsis there. Just
some inclement weather. There was like a small thunderstorm,
right.
Things get tough.
No big deal.
No big deal. They're definitely not in the high Himalaya.
Also, we're feeling responsible for his father's death. You caused your father's death. All right, let's just call it what it is.
You murdered your father.
Let's check out this Vertical Limit after murdering his father.
Sounds great.
That wouldn't
sound.
The movie was released on December 8th, 2000. It's directed by Martin Campbell. Best known, I don't know if you're looking at the outline or if you've looked at the outline. Do you know what he's best known for directing?
Bond films, right?
Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah. 2 Bond films, GoldenEye and Casino Royale.
Yeah, well, you can see the mark of wannabe Bond action vibes all over this movie.
I mean, I don't know if James Bond has ever gone up against nitroglycerin like Chris O'Donnell does in Vertical Limit, but we'll get to that. So movie stars, like we mentioned, Chris O'Donnell, Robin Tunney, Bill Paxton, Scott Glenn, and our guy, Ed Viesturs.
Oh, Ed Viesturs. Like, bless you, sir. So good to see him on the big screen. Love that man.
We're going to have a lot to say about Ed coming up.
That's right.
I forgot how much he's in this movie. I mean, up to the end of the movie, he's just like lingering in the background.
He's lingering in the background anytime they're at base camp. I don't know if you noticed, but they frame every shot so that Ed is just like over someone's shoulder. It's great. You're like,
Yeah.
hey, we're legit because this guy is here. And
This guy's here.
He hadn't even, I think, at that point accomplished all of those 8,000 meter peaks without oxygen. He'd only done some of them at that point, but they're like, hey, this guy.
They say in the movie it's at 12. He had 2 left.
He had 2 left. That's right. Yeah, I love that they were just like, where could we put Ed? Put Ed somewhere. Ed needs to be lingering.
So some notes from production. I found on a great Washington Post article from December of 2000. They didn't film on location, but they did go to New Zealand and British Columbia. They also created a lot of the sets on sound stages and miniatures. I mean, it was a pretty elaborate production. The multiple members of the cast, including Robin Tunney and Scott Glenn, did their own stunts. That Tyrolean Traverse that you see Robin Tunney doing, that's her, which is pretty impressive. Producers from Columbia Pictures at the time recognized the, quote, public's appetite for alpine dramas after watching the success of John Krakauer's Page Turner about the 96 disaster on Mount Everest, which of course was into thin air. This definitely I wrote it later on. I mean, this movie could not have been made or could never be made again. Could not have been made before or be made again. This is an absolute capitalization of the outdoor movement of the 80s and 90s. And it's like, let's make a real outdoor movie, but also an extreme outdoor movie.
Super extreme, full of drama.
And regarding the inclusion of things like nitroglycerin, back to the extreme nature of it, director Martin Campbell and star Scott Glenn had several quotes. They said what they're making is a roller coaster ride, which will put your heart in your mouth. You know, if you wanted to make a movie about the definitive mountain climbing film, that would be as interesting as watching paint dry. So there you go.
I mean, they had to make it Hollywood. No one's going to watch like climbers just heavy breathing for 2 hours.
But this movie is a bit of a punchline, I feel like, in general, kind of to the outdoor community. But definitely was your choice. So you said you definitely having another look at it. I mean, what were you expecting going in, and kind of, you know, did it live up to the expectations in your mind? Did you enjoy it more the second time?
Oh yeah, I absolutely enjoyed it more. I've also, like, in the time, let's say it's been, I don't know, 10 or 12 years since I first watched it. In that time, you know, I became more of a climber. So I've, you know, done multi-pitch climbs. I climb outdoors, whatever. So I viewed it through a different lens this time. And I knew that's the punchline, right? Is that if you are somebody who climbs, or you're at least like vaguely familiar with climbing, there's a lot in this movie that is not exactly correct. Like, I can't even get cams, and their use in this movie is just bizarre. But I thought, like, all right, is this movie A, as entertaining as I remember it being, and B, yeah, will I see it through this fresh eye of like somebody who does climb and has climbed and has been in these scenarios where thankfully no one has cut my rope.
No kidding, right?
Yeah, so it made it way more fun, honestly, because I think the average moviegoer might watch this and be like, that was awesome, like, so much adrenaline, what a cool movie, the mountains are rad. And then I'm like,
just giggling, totally.
Laughing the whole time, rolling my eyes in absolute joy. Like, there's something fun about seeing mainstream media get something so totally wrong.
And it is so much of its time, though. And I mean, what I said earlier about it, I don't think it could be made again. And this is on multiple levels. We'll get definitely stuff you're saying about the outdoorsy part, but just the opening scene, like the font on the screen, right? And the way they're like following like the hawk or the eagle over the landscape in Utah. And I'm like, this would be, I mean, I wrote down the extremes they go in order to make everything like an 11. Everything is just dialed up, right? Even the sound, every clunk of something is accentuated. I mean, it just almost felt like a parody of itself, but it was made so sincerely.
Yes, totally. I mean, even the music just has that, like, it's almost melodramatic, and it feels like,
oh my God,
like if a made-for-TV movie was taking place in the Himalaya. It was true in the Karakoram, my fault.
Yeah, like how many beats away is Vertical Limit from like Sharknado? And I'm not even saying that like as a joke. Like, I mean, it's like, they're pretty freaking close. Only like the people at Sharknado like were in on it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think the difference, like I said, is that the average person doesn't really see necessarily any of the nitpicky outdoorsy climbing things that we would see. But I think even then, the movie is pretty overly dramatic. You know, it's really aiming to be this giant action film, and with this, you know, all these different plot lines intertwining. You've got the mysterious old guy, the bearded man, who then dry shaves his face because he's got to go up to the mountain and find his frozen wife. and, just like all sorts of things. There's constant like helicopters, things are exploding. There's a whole, the Pakistani army is out here doing their thing. Like there's just so much happening and all at once. It really is. It's like everywhere, everything all at once, but mountains.
Yeah. I wrote down too, like, did the producers watch Cliffhanger and say like, hold my beer?
Come on,
like, you think you can, you think Lithgow and Stallone are over the top?
Wait till we bring Chris O'Donnell and Bill Paxton, two major action stars.
Yeah, I mean, it was that moment when they showed the father hitting the deck. I mean, I didn't remember that.
In the most unrealistic way, that's not what would happen. That.
Right?
If he really did, he would just be like, splat.
Oh,
that was not splatty.
They were up there.
Like, we could talk about, and we will, there's a whole nother moment in the movie that is overly splatty.
Oh, well, we are definitely talking about that moment.
Yeah, when he hits the deck, they're just like, let's open with Dad dying. And then he hits the ground. There's no blood. There's no explosion of body parts. He's just like thunk.
Shawnté, they showed it. I again back to Cliffhanger, like that. Another movie that opens with a climbing accident, and the woman falls, and then and it's another. Stallone is racked with grief, like Chris O'Donnell's racked with grief. But you know what happens? So I'm watching. I had completely forgotten this, and I'm watching. I'm like, okay, there you go. He falls. This is where we'll revisit this moment again at the end of the movie. I know. And then they show his body.
That's because they have to one-up Cliffhanger. They have to one-up Cliffhanger.
It's unbelievable. Okay, well, let's get into some of the stuff in the movie. So, best outdoor moments. Let's talk about the best things we like from an outdoor perspective. What were some of yours? What were the things that you liked about from an outdoorsy perspective in Vertical Living?
I mean, listen, the cinematography was fantastic. It was, these sweeping, big, beautiful, shots of gorgeous landscapes. I mean, Monument Valley at the beginning of the film, just stunning. And then you get into whatever they're using. Like, I think they used Mount Cook for some of it to stand in for K2.
They did, yeah.
So, whatever they were using to stand in for K2 and that whole environment in the Karakoram, it's like, gorgeous shots. And that was, that's like a little catnip for me. I just love seeing beautiful views of the outdoors. I mean, I prefer to be seeing them with my own eyes in the outdoors, but this is the second best, So I think they really nailed that kind of immersive feeling that you're in this cold place. It's beautiful. I mean, we'll get to like how cold they're dressed for. I have some beef, but yeah, I thought they really nailed like the beauty of it and sort of putting you in that environment. And, even though I have major problems with how the climbing was done, it's always fun to see people climbing on film, whether or not they're doing things that you may do in the real world.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I just, and honestly, I loved the drama. Like I said, so like we were just saying, so many outdoor films now really lean into the emotions and the, that side of things, which I think is great. But it's fun just sort of having a popcorn movie about climbing and about alpinism, really.
I think what any of these movies, sometimes when you get down, when you put too much under the microscope, you lose the fun of it, which is, the Hollywoodness of it. And to your point, the beauty of it really comes through on I would have been fun to see this on the big screen. Yeah. I think when you see like base camp and things like that, it doesn't, I think, hold up as well when they get into the more intimate moments, like you're talking about, whether it's the climbing or you start to tell like, okay, you weren't actually there. You're not actually doing this, but it did look good. It was a good looking film. Yeah. Utah for me came through, and I know that was a pretty short and harrowing part of the movie. Yeah. I loved starting in Monument Valley. I thought that was really cool.
It was great. Yeah. I mean, talking about those sweeping shots, and you've got, right away into the action on the wall, which was honestly kind of hilarious. But yeah, I mean, it brings you right in. You're in an outdoor movie from that first frame. It's easy to talk about what went wrong. But what went right? Ed Viesturs. Like, listen, I think it is sort of ridiculous that he's in this film, and that like we said, he's in it a lot. Yeah. And but I love that man. I look up to Ed. I've read his books. When I teach, I always use his motto, getting to the top is optional, getting down is mandatory. It's actually a guiding principle for me in the mountains. So you don't get summit fever. Like, I think he's a good egg. I've met Ed before. I actually used to keep a blog, which I discovered is still active, called What Would Ed Do? blogspot.com. Or I think it's what would Ed do?
Genius title.
Yeah, just ridiculous. What would Ed do? And so it was just me documenting my hikes, and backpacking trips. And then at the end, whatever went wrong, I was like, what would Ed have done instead?
I love it.
But I told him about
I spent about a half an hour the other night going through it.
Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. I told Ed about this when I met him, and he just looked very confused. He's like, "You have a website with my name?" I'm like, "Well, no, it's really about the spirit of you." Is that weirder? That's probably more weird. But
it's the Ed Viesturs equivalent of the Chuck Norris fact generator.
Yeah, exactly. Poor Ed. Yeah, but it was great seeing him in this movie as 900 million times as we did. Although I was like, Ed, how are you going to put Ed Viesturs in this movie and then not have him do anything?
Yeah, I mean, so I had Ed in as best use of outdoor gear, footwear, and apparel. I the deployment of Ed Viesturs was something I wrote down.
That's great.
We climbed Rainier with him and Peter Whitaker when I was at Timberland.
Nice.
And there's a photo of us, and it's like all sales and marketing people from Timberland, right? And Peter's pretty outspoken. And then you just see Ed, he's kind of in the back, kind of like leaning over somebody's shoulder. Like, here's like the greatest living American mountaineer. And he's like just in the back, like, hey, I'm back here too, guys. The most probably the most famous guy in the photo for sure. But it's so funny. Everything you just said about him, like, and it's almost the scene where he has the most dialogue, I feel like it's the meeting at base camp when they're trying to rally. Peter's trying to rally everybody to go up and look for the people who've been lost in the avalanche. Right. And Ed almost derails the movie because he's right. It's like, he's like, yeah, he's just himself. He's like, yeah, no, you wouldn't go up there. It's suicide. He's like, yeah, this is just what happens in the mountains. And then, Peter, the morality police of the movie is like, we can't let them stay up there. It's like, well, actually, you kind of can.
That's his sister. You can't expect him. Listen, he's morality police. It's his sister up there. So I'm going to give Peter some slack here. Yes, Ed is correct. Although I have, that's like my own morality is that I could never, as interested as I am in spending time in other mountain ranges, especially some of the, bigger mountain ranges over in Asia. It's this idea that is how people view it is so messed up to me that, no, people we just leave them like they just die. I can't fathom going up, Everest or Annapurna or anything and just seeing like dead bodies along the way that we just leave there because it's not possible in many ways to bring them down. Right. So that's for me why I've never, gotten into that level of mountaineering. It's just, I don't love the ethics of it. And I understand that that's why Ed would say something like that, but I just can't get down with it.
Yeah. So you mentioned in that you thought the Morse code was one of the better outdoor parts.
I just loved it. I liked it had such a throwback feel in a movie where you have like exploding nitroglycerin. There was something sort of wholesome about them getting rescued partially because they knew Morse code. Like it's just such a random. I think about that when I think about like ships and stuff. I don't necessarily think about using it in the Karakoram, but
it did feel a little like somebody, was like, oh, outdoorsy people, like they know Morse code. We got to make sure we get that into the script.
Right? It was shoehorned in there for sure. Or they just could not figure out the plot device by which they could communicate. With these radios that have an incredible range.
Oh my God. Well, that was it. I'm like, I think it would work.
These radios will not be talking to each other from base camp on K2 to like up on the shoulder before the summit.
You do make a good point, though. I feel like Morse code and quicksand are kind of like movie tropes from the 20th century that we just don't do anymore. Like quicksand and Morse code, like they're just like, they were in everything for like cartoons, movies, and now it's like, no one does that.
I was terrified of quicksand as a kid, and I was convinced I'd need Morse code at some point.
All right, what about worst outdoor moments? What didn't work for me from an outdoorsy point of view?
All right, okay, I've got a couple things here. So let's just start at the beginning of the movie. We've kind of already discussed this, but when they're on the wall in Monument Valley and they're just out on their expedition, on their day climbing, their major expedition to spend a couple hours climbing, maybe a day. I did not understand again any of the mechanics of how they were operating on the wall. It is. I climb with friends and you're chit-chatting usually when you're not in the middle of climbing. It's fun. Like that's part of why we do this when we do it with other people is that social aspect. But it was such a bizarre way to be on the wall. And like the weird, like, oh, Annie, tell her to check her anchor. Like, sir, do you not? That was just the whole thing was such a weird vibe. So that was one of my least like as far as visually, it was one of my most favorite scenes, seeing Monument Valley. But from a realistic outdoor perspective, I was already like, oh, right, this movie.
And it's the first appearance of a couple times where there was a misunderstanding of how climbing cams are used.
Oh my gosh. Like, the way cams ended up in this. So cam, for the listeners that are not familiar, it's a little squeezy device that has these kind of interlocking little teeth. They come in different sizes. And the idea is that you squeeze to narrow the cam so that it's its narrowest. You put it in a crack, and then the cam expands, and friction is holding it in there. And again, thinking about the fact that Annie is supposed to be, this amazing world-class alpinist who's just hanging out with billionaires climbing. The fact that she couldn't properly place cams that wouldn't get pulled out in Monument Valley kind of surprised me.
Well, that, and then the dangling and like reaching with the cam. I'm like number one, like if you place a cam, it's never just putting a piece of paper in a slot and it just fits. Like you gotta find the way in. Where do you release it, right? And that happens later. I don't know if you want to call that out specifically later when Monique's on the cliff, and I'm just gonna jump and jam this thing in, and that's gonna work. I mean, it's okay, guys, and actually, this is something I thought of because if you read about it, they went to like a 5-week boot camp to learn to climb. The actors did and everything. I mean, there was a lot of. And when we get into gear and apparel, there's something I want to talk about too, but there was a lot of effort made for some level of authenticity that looks like just half of it. They're like,
No, I'm sure that's what it was.
What other things didn't work for you from an outdoorsy perspective?
Oh my gosh. All right. The base camp party throwdown. What is going on here? Okay. So people definitely on the big mountains, when you have these expeditions, I'd say primarily Everest, really. There can be this party atmosphere, right? You hear about it, you've read about it, you've seen it in documentaries, whatever. But not the night before your summit push. Also, K2, it's not a walk-up. It's not like, oh, we're at base camp, and now in a couple hours we'll be at the summit. Like you stage your way up these peaks unless you're doing like a pretty much all-out, quote, assault on the peak or whatever. You're setting up camps along the way, you're moving your gear up, you're fixing your lines, none of which seems to have been done in this movie. I don't know what they were doing to get up to the summit so quickly.
Was there a single fixed rope?
I don't think so.
That you saw.
I mean, even like when they got back to the part where I'm guessing that Annie did her Tyrolean and there was that big gap. And do you remember?
That's right, that one. Yeah.
He's holding where Peter's holding his ice axes. Just jumps across this gaping void and just sticks it. He just sticks it. He's fine. He hasn't wrenched either of his shoulders out of their sockets, whatever. Anyway, some of this is just absolutely magnificently bizarre to me. Like how no one is going to be like getting crunk the night before your summit attempt.
Also, I wrote down the pre-climb party too. Who's doing all these dishes? They're all holding like mugs and stuff like that, right? And they're like, and there's like, they're barbecuing chickens. I mean, it is like full on like in the city barbecue. Only they're at base camp of K2.
Yeah, and all these people, like K2 is not, like it's certainly one of the, more well-known 8,000 meter peaks, but it's not the same exact vibe as you get at Everest, where you also have, backpacking groups coming in to just check out base camp.
Right, the treks that come through.
Yeah, there's so many more people from a volume standpoint than go through the Everest base camp. Like K2 is not necessarily, it's such a technical mountain, and I don't know that you can really drag people up at the same way you could kind of drag some people up Everest. But yeah, the whole thing just was so, all right, I get that you needed some sort of plot device here, but come on, guys.
The biggest problem I had, and it's exactly in line with what you're talking about, is how they had all this technical advisement, and they're supposed to be on K2, which, they say it in the movie, so it's harder to climb than Everest and everything. That's the reputation it has. Everyone on the mountain looked like they were just out for and the way they were dressed, they were just out for a random ski day.
Oh my gosh, they're just wearing their colorful 90s snow gear, beanies.
Yep. Yep. Taking their goggles off when they don't need, like it
Nobody's
just,
face is red or dry. Their lips aren't
nope.
chapped. Nobody looks like they have frostnip. It's so
There
bizarre.
was one moment near the end where Chris O'Donnell, I feel like, had something covering his face, like a balaclava or something covering his face. But for the most part, just people's jackets zipped up or maybe opened up a little bit. Sometimes they're one strap in their backpacks.
Backpacks was like it's a JanSport. I was like, come on, guys, you're not going to class right now. You know that backpack would be on and like buckled up. You'd have your hood on. You'd have like your full snow goggles on. You would not be able to see any of their skin because they wouldn't want to. Like that's one of the best ways to get frostbite.
No supplemental oxygen.
No supplemental oxygen, even after they mentioned like how amazing it was that Ed is one of the only people to have climbed that many 8,000 meters with oxygen. Like you'd think that they would think in the movie.
So now we're all going to do it that way.
We're not going to learn anything from him except for that we don't need oxygen.
We don't need oxygen. We're not going to listen to him about rescuing people.
No.
But we are going to stop using oxygen.
Oh my gosh. We're also not going to, let's talk about this crevasse rescue scene, okay? I just need to point out.
Okay, let's do it.
Like, Peter's sitting there. Peter's like, I have an idea. I'm just going to dead weight lift this person. I'm just going to haul them out with this rope by my bare hands. It's going to be fine. As we see, that does not work because that's not how you rescue people from a crevasse. You have to set up like a pulley system so there's some sort of, resistance to get this person up. You're not lifting a loaf of bread.
No, so, I mean, otherwise, there were a lot of things I thought they did well when you get into best outdoor kind of gear, footwear, and apparel. And I thought the brands represented were really well. They looked fairly authentic. When they're hanging out at base camp, they were wearing kind of something like if you and I showed up, we would be dressed like they would be dressed and those kinds of things. It wasn't just the North Face sponsored this movie and every single person has a North Face jacket. I saw Arc'teryx, we saw JanSport, we saw the North Face, we saw, I think I saw a hardware logo. Like they were all there, So I'm sure that was not an easy undertaking and the production design to deploy all of those brands. Yeah. But, the honorable mention for me on outdoor gear, the best use of it is the nitroglycerin. It's just the most confounding decision to me in movie history. Like, at what point, if you and I sat here in a room and said, let's craft a Hollywood-esque climbing movie, how many drafts would we write before nitroglycerin would enter the story?
I have an idea. And let's make it green so it looks like toxic ooze. We know how to get someone out of a crevasse. Let's trigger 1 million more avalanches. And let's just hope the crevasse doesn't get filled in with all of the snow and rock that we've just dislodged with our nitroglycerin exploding.
Also, his note to Annie in the crevasse isn't, hey, we're gonna displace the snow with an explosion. It's just bang.
I forgot about that. It's like, hope you interpreted all of our earlier Morse code correctly. I will be exploding everything around you. So just
this is code for they're going to ignite some nitroglycerin.
And also, okay, so when this nitroglycerin explodes, which it does multiple times throughout the movie in multiple places, it does not always explode in the same way. Like, we can just set it up to explode right next to this crevasse and everybody inside will be fine. But if it explodes on the side of this mountain, this dude is getting blown off.
Oh, yeah.
But this woman will stay on because I guess she put her, she was holding on real tight to that rope. So,
she did, to the point where her finger got, dislocated.
That's fair. I think that's from banging into the wall after the explosion.
That was from when she was jamming the cam.
Yes, from that willy-nilly flying cam jam. Really one of the best climbing moves I've ever seen.
The flying cam jam. Yeah, it's classic.
But yeah, nitroglycerin just doing whatever it wants each time. But this time it'll be fine. We won't worry about it exploding so close to humans.
And what about outdoor best use of outdoor gear, footwear, and apparel for you?
Well, I think the Dex is the star of the show here. They don't really explain to the average viewer what Dex is or why it's important to have it on this climb, but
it just works.
It just works when you're dying in a crevasse. It's fine. But the Dex was great. I don't know, whenever at some point in the screenwriting process they learned about Dex, they're like, hell yeah, we need to just put this in. We need to be jabbing people with it. I loved it because Dex is a reality that you're carrying on those mountains. I also loved the Pakistani army helicopter. Really was doing the most. I mean,
it did all the heavy lifting.
It was doing literally and figuratively up there, carting them to the thinnest air it could go to, while making real unrealistic. We'll get into that in a second. I've got some problems with that scene, but listen, that helicopter really showed up. I thought that was a great innovation. We love to see a helicopter in a movie. And those like giant miner's headlamps that they were wearing in the crevasse.
Oh, yeah.
They look like they're
okay.
made out of aluminum. They're like, here's my Coleman headlamp I got at Target in 1984. But that thing just went to the vertical limit because they never seem to ever turn off. They're fine. They're not even flickering.
Right.
They are made to last. I would like to know the manufacturer of those headlamps.
Well, so let's get into outdoor lessons learned. So my first one is your Ziploc bag can also double as a blood collection sack for showing people where you are buried in the snow. That's a tip, outdoorsy people.
Can we just talk about this blood bag for a second? Because the concession here is that they have drained. Bill Paxton took a little bit of his murderee's blood so they could send it up in this like sandwich bag with a flare. And when it emerges from the crevasse and explodes in the air, it unleashes a holy torrent of blood, unlike anything I've ever
seen. So much blood.
Like barrels and barrels. Like if an entire brewery of blood just exploded.
They drained every drop out of this poor guy, which would have been frozen probably by the time they got to doing it. But anyway.
That was like, wow, where did all that? It was just a sandwich bag. Like what? How did that happen?
They packed the special explosive flares, too.
Oh, gosh. That was a special scene for me. Maybe not.
And just 5 seconds earlier, she's trying to beat up Bill Paxton, too. And then they just kind of resolve their differences pretty quickly so they can get out together.
Yes, we got to.
They're all okay.
Yeah.
It's okay you killed that guy. We'll use his blood.
That's fine. Let's go.
Other outdoor lessons learned. If you're a spiritual mountain badass, you can get by in the Himalaya with a canvas parka and a headband.
Listen, Montgomery Wick needs not anything else.
He's got like the LL Bean 1975 special and a ripped piece of his T-shirt covering his ears. He's good.
Yeah, that a wish and a prayer. He's A-okay.
My last one was movie stars don't need supplemental oxygen in the death zone. That was my other outdoor lesson.
Yeah, it's a superpower. It's like, again, if you're climbing with Montgomery Wick, you really don't need much. That guy has like a halo of protection around him, I'm thinking. So... good for them for bringing him in.
Did you have any lessons?
Oh yeah, I've got some lessons. Okay, make sure you're the one carrying the knife.
Big one.
Oh man, yeah. So carry the knife. Always be the one to carry the knife.
Yes.
Even if it gives you a guilt complex later. Carry an Abby beacon. I don't know, a probe, a shovel. Like my lessons learned.
How about that as an idea?
Are all the things they didn't do.
Right.
Double check your anchor.
They didn't have any climbers on set to help them out. They just had to make it up as they were going along.
Ed was not there for that. He was like, where's the craft services table?
Ed's just eating like, I'm not helping you fucking people.
Yeah, he's like, I got to get strong for my next climb, guys.
That's right.
Got to wear my cool Eddie Bauer pants. Listen to the pros when it comes to weather forecasts. I don't know. It's almost as if they know what they're doing. And maybe you should, when someone says, there is a crazy storm about to descend on this mountain, maybe your ego can go, I guess I'll take the day off and maybe we should go down.
Any other lessons?
No, really just listen to, wizened old men that live in the mountains.
In their canvas coats.
Yeah, they're going to know everything with their, ragtag vibes. They don't need capitalism. They don't need gear. They just need what fire burns within.
My last nitpick and sort of the grossest part of the movie was them having her kiss him over the sister, like right after all this shit happened. They get into the classic movie framing and the body positioning between the actors. And I'm like, don't do it. Don't, God damn it.
There was not a single moment in that film where you would have been like, I ship those two as a potential couple.
Right.
There's not a moment that led to this moment. It was they were just like, oh no, wait, someone's got to kiss the hot girl.
Yep. Well, yeah, it's like there are two attractive white people. They're going to kiss, obviously.
That's how movies work.
That's what happens. Yeah, and I think you could have had it happen, but it could have. Then you need an epilogue where they're like, "Oh, they're back in the real world" or something like that, right?
Or there needed to be like some lead up. There was some tension at base camp. Yeah. Maybe they were having some sensual energy. I don't know, but I none of that happened. Chris was like this nerdy dude that just stumbled into base camp. His sister happened to be there because he was shooting snow tigers or some shit. Like. Also, we won't even
God, we haven't even touched on his photography career.
We haven't even touched on this. But
Yeah, and also this is minutes, presumably maybe hours after they had just rescued this girl from the crevasse, seen these other two people basically, die at the hand of Montgomery Wake, while the bled out body of the other guy is like laying next door to all this happening.
You know what I love doing? I like kissing. I love kissing in those moments. It's great for tension reduction.
It helps, right?
Yeah, it helps.
Think they're still together, those two? What happened? What happened after the movie? Did they get together?
Yeah, and then she probably died in the mountains the next year, or like maybe 2 or 3 years.
Working for the same guy.
Working for the same guy, unfortunately. Can we just go back to the Nitro for a second?
Oh, please. I could talk about the Nitro all day long.
So when we first are introduced to this Nitro, it's in its little metal James Bondy containers, We're like, oh, okay, it's unstable, but it's protected. And then suddenly this shot while they're up on the mountain cuts back to that little storage unit and they're all oozing everywhere. There's green sludge everywhere.
It's everywhere.
When did this happen? And then they try to explain like, oh, it's sunlight. I'm like, but they're in a shed. They're in a shed. Like how just the shed has been there for presumably a long time. So they would know if there was sun coming in and the nitroglycerin wasn't just deposited there that day. Like how did it just suddenly everything just starts oozing? But meanwhile, the shed ones are oozing, but the ones in their backpacks aren't oozing, even though they've been in the sun all day.
They're fine.
Until suddenly, oh, wait, get them in the... And all they say, by the way, over the radio, this radio with incredible range, is, the shade, get them in the shade. And they just start like piling snow on top. They don't know why. They're not...
They just get it immediately.
Get it in the shade and now bury it. Like, nobody tells you to bury it, but their instinct, maybe that would be my instinct would be like, fuck this shit. Yeah. I'm putting this in the shade and running far, far away or, snow trudging far, far away.
Listen, no one, when they're laying out the plan in base camp, like, so we're going to carry this nitroglycerin.
Yeah. Let's learn a few things about this combustible material before we leave.
Sounds good.
Actually, let's not. Let's just go by gut.
I was actually thinking before you said that, do we have any nitroglycerin? Because that could really help us up there to get these people out of the crevasse.
Like, nobody, they were just like, just take it. Good luck to you. We're going to pretend we don't see you taking it, but we think it's a great idea. Like, I love that the Pakistani army guy is just like, I'm not giving you permission, but I'm not saying no.
Not saying no.
But I'm also not going to tell you anything about it.
Do you think it was the nitroglycerin that got Martin Campbell the GoldenEye job? Do you think the Broccoli family is watching Vertical Limit and going, well, what we need is a guy who knows how to use nitro? You know what I mean? Like, was that the deciding moment?
Yeah, and that and the kiss. Mm-hmm.
And the kiss. Good point.
Kiss a lot in those Bond movies. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, last thing we have to decide, did Vertical Limit make you want to go outside?
Colin, I'm not even going to pretend that it didn't. I absolutely watched the opening scene in Monument Valley, and my immediate thought was I remember this movie, and B, oh man, it's been a while since I've been to Utah.
Spring desert trip, here we go.
100%, I'm absolutely going in March. But so I immediately wanted to go to Utah, not gonna lie. And then I'm also real excited to get up into the Sierra this winter. So we've had a couple storms come in. I got to see some beautiful snowy mountains in this movie. So I'm not going to lie, it absolutely made me want to go outside. Yeah,
I agree with you. When I wrote this, it was right after I watched it. And I wrote maybe with a question mark. Because I'm like, his parts definitely did. Other parts made me embarrassed to be an outdoor enthusiast. But there was enough, all the parts that were what we talked about, like the big vistas and all those things, where you just get that, like, oh, I love going and being immersed in that world. And yet it doesn't even need to be that big. Like just being on a trail, being near something that makes you feel good about being outside, definitely got that vibe. The filmmakers did all they could do with all the dialogue and the action to rip that away from us. But I think ultimately it didn't happen. And it makes me want to go outside for sure.
And I feel good about this. Like, I'm glad to know that unlike our as yet unresolved fight over cotton, that we're on the same page here.
We are. I feel like every 10 years we need to revisit Vertical Limit on this show.
Sounds great. I'll put that in my calendar.
10 years from now, I'll be like, all right, it's time. We can't watch it in between.
No, it's every 10 years, like a special anniversary.
Exactly.
Showgirls of Mountaineering.
Actually, that would be an excellent pairing, double feature. What do you pair with Vertical Limit? Is it Showgirls?
Honestly, maybe I'll watch Showgirls tonight.
Is that the new category? Does this movie make you want to watch Showgirls?
Yeah, it's a great category, actually.
Well, that's Vertical Limit. I think we did it. So So Shawnté, what's going on with you? Where can people find you? Anything people should be checking out right now?
Oh gosh, well, I am deep in the work. I actually have the first deadline for a new book that I'm writing. So that I will have more on that soon. Kind of keeping it close to the vest right now. But yeah, otherwise you can find me on the Instagrams and at by my name. So Shawnté Salabert, ShawntéSalabert.com is my website. And it hasn't been updated in a long time.
It's all right. Or you can go to whatwouldeddo.blogspot.com.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you could go there and just know what you're in for, okay? It's something.
Well, be sure to follow or subscribe to The Rock Fight wherever you're listening to this and send all of your comments on Vertical Limit to myrockfight@gmail.com. The Rock Fight's a production of Rock Fight LLC. For Shawnté Salabert, I'm Colin True. Thanks for listening. And here to take us out is Krista Makes from Less Than Jake with the Rock Fight fight song. We'll see you next time, Rock Fighters.